Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everyone. We had last week off. That's rare. We normally don't take an entire week off, where we both, we'll bring in a substitute out of the bullpen sometimes. This was a rare week off. I guess if you have to take one, late August is fine. And I feel like I saw Mickey Kaus was doing a dive log. So yeah, I guess other folks stepped up and sort of took up some of the slack, which is good.
But you got your annual blast of air conditioning in Arizona?
Yes, I love going out there, and it's funny because 6 years ago, it's hard to believe it was that long. 6 years ago, when I was out there, I went to a J.D. Hayworth rally. I went to a McCain rally. I interviewed Ben Quayle and Pamela Gorman. This is when I was at AOL's now defunct Politics Daily. This year I went out there and put out some feelers, and everybody said, you don't have to worry about John McCain. He's not going to lose the primary. He could have trouble in the general, but so I chose not to take any valuable time away from the family to cover McCain. And then I get back and I start seeing he's in the fight of his life. He's fighting for his political life, and I'm like, if John McCain loses, and I was out there, and I just came back, and now Trump's going to Arizona today as we tape this. He's going to Mexico and Arizona on the border, and then I was going to really kick myself, and then of course McCain and Rubio easily win. It turns out I was totally right to spend time with my family.
Now McCain, he won easily in that he beat Kelly Ward, who was on the far right, by 20 points, but he got about 55%, I think. That strikes me as a little soft for someone of McCain's stature. There definitely is a faction of the Arizona right that sees him as too moderate.
Absolutely.
He is still struggling how to position himself vis-a-vis Trump, because obviously there is a Trump fan base amongst the.
I wonder what would have happened if John Shadegg or Matt Salmon, somebody who is a serious and congressman or former congressman, and would have been backed by serious conservative groups. If someone like that had ever run against McCain, I wonder what might have happened. But he has gotten pretty lucky by the people who have challenged.
I mean,
him.
J.D. Hayworth was a fairly reputable guy, wasn't he?
Well, the funny thing is, though, as I wrote at the now defunct AOL's Politics Daily, I guess this is lost to history.
Right.
They've taken down everything there, like it's totally gone. But I wrote a pretty compelling takedown of.
Right, I remember that, but he wasn't a total joke candidate. He was a congressman.
He was a congressman, but he didn't have if Matt Salmon or who was the other guy I mentioned?
Shadegg.
John Shadegg. They would have had they might have had the Tea Party behind them, but they would have also had, I think, the kind of intellectual, philosophical conservatives behind them in a way that Hayworth, I just don't think, had. He was more kind of more of a showman, and his record. That was a time when ideological purity seemed to matter 6 years ago. A lot more than it does now, and Hayworth was much more, I would say, much more of a Donald Trump than he was Ted Cruz.
Well, I guess the question is now, McCain is running against Ann Kirkpatrick, the Democratic congresswoman. She is, relatively moderate. She ran a smart campaign to get into Congress a couple years ago. She seems to have a good feel for the state, and Hillary is doing better than expected in Arizona. Polls generally show her and Trump close to a dead heat, and McCain is kind of caught between playing up his long-standing support for immigration reform and being accepted by Arizona's Latino community, and trying to deal with the anti-immigrant Trump right. McCain has been a wily survivor for a long time, and certainly is going to be well financed and experienced on the trail. He doesn't lollygag these campaigns. But do you think he's in trouble?
Well, the smart people, that I talk to who know the state think that that he's pretty safe. Basically, and then maybe this is now conventional wisdom, but basically what I can discern is that Mark Kirk loses in Illinois. If Trump loses, New Hampshire, which seems likely, then Kelly Ayotte probably loses. He has to lose Trump has to lose by about 10 points before you lose McCain and Rubio, is what the sense is.
McCain and Rubio. I would think
McCain and Rubio.
I wouldn't assume Rubio was as firmly ensconced as McCain.
Well, I don't think Rubio's Democratic opponent is considered to be top tier. Now, it's not Alan Grayson, so well, certainly a couple steps up from that. That's what I'm hearing. I mean, that's the sense. Is that there are different tiers of Republicans who are in trouble. And it's contingent on Donald Trump's performance and whether or not he's a drag down ballot.
Well, let's shift to Florida for a second. So Rubio and Patrick Murphy win their primaries handily. Rubio dispatches a Trump-like businessman. Grayson was socked with domestic abuse allegations from his former wife, and he completely flamed out after that. So on one hand, your point about Patrick Murphy being a bit of a weak opponent is bolstered by the hits he took in the primary. There was a local news expose basically saying that he puffed up his resume. He's trying to sell himself as a business owner, and that wasn't quite true. Essentially, a rich kid that got propped up by his dad and had these paper thin companies that didn't really do very much. But his politics are very moderate. Grayson tried to hit him on that, calling him he was a former Republican, say he's not really a Democrat, he's not a progressive. But Grayson didn't even get 20%, so that argument didn't take him too far amongst Democrats. So at minimum, he's not necessarily in a bad place with the swing of Florida, ideologically speaking, but perhaps this resume issue could dog him. But Rubio, let's keep in mind, has never won 50% of the vote in a statewide Florida election. He won on his first term. He won 48% last time in a three-way race where Democrats split between Christ and Kendrick Meek. He got humiliated in the presidential primary vis-a-vis Donald Trump. His big number here is against a pretty weak lesser Trump-like figure. So we don't know if he has that much of a goodwill to fall back on with the Florida electorate. And he is being charged by Murphy and others of not taking a Senate job seriously, terrible attendance record, and now won't even commit to fulfilling the term for 6 years, which is giving Murphy a new opening to resurrect the charge that he's not really committed to being a senator. So, I mean, it's early in this general election race. I don't know if we know how well these two arguments will gel against each other, but it seems early to me to say Rubio has a wide opening here.
We'll see how things shake out. That's what I'm hearing. Look, incumbents usually win. I don't get the sense that Rubio is in peril. Obviously, that could change. Let's see how things look. I think even just in a couple of weeks in the polling, we'll know a lot more after Labor Day.
It also seems like Trump's standing in Florida, I feel, is not clear to me. I see polls where it's close in Florida and polls where it's more like 5 points. I mean, you're saying it needs to be 10, and I haven't really seen that in Florida. But I feel you. I mean, Trump, Florida's sort of a second home to Trump, so that in sense could help him. But we don't really know to what extent a Latino surge in voting might materialize.
Yeah,
I
guess the theory is that that in order for McCain and Rubio to lose, Trump has to lose. It has to be a landslide for them to get swept out. Whereas that's not the case with Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania, or Johnson in Wisconsin, or certainly Kelly Ayotte in New Hampshire. And then I guess there's a surprisingly tight race in North Carolina. So
I mean, some of this might be, it might be a landslide in part because Republicans don't show up; they're so demoralized. I mean, it's not. I imagine it's less of a case that there's going to be a lot of ticket switchers. I normally vote Republican down the line. I hate Trump, so now I will vote Democratic down the line. There are probably not too many people like that. But there may be people who said, I'm sick of this whole thing. I'm so mad my party nominated Trump. I'm just going to stay home. That could drag down a Rubio.
Yeah, that's a huge danger to people, to other Republicans down ballot. Bill, I would say I think that one of the really interesting things, though, just about last night is they have John McCain, and we could argue about how conservative he is, but he's clearly seen as like an establishment moderate by the base. And Marco Rubio, once the Tea Party darling, but now I think pretty clearly seen by the Breitbart crowd as sort of a sellout, moderate establishment type, easily winning their primaries. And I think this is really interesting. Compare this to 2010 when Rubio won, and all the incumbents who were defeated in conventions or primaries. That's when you had Mike Lee take out Bennett. You had Joe Miller actually beat Murkowski in a primary in Alaska. She came back with that write-in campaign. Rand Paul beats Mitch McConnell's handpicked senator. Christine O'Donnell beats an incumbent congressman from Delaware running for Senate. Pat Toomey, I think that was the same year Pat Toomey basically beat or was going to beat Specter. So that was amazing, 2010. And now we're in 2016, and you have Donald Trump running as this outsider anti-establishment candidate, and yet that ethos seems to be solely a cult of personality. It is not transferable, it doesn't seem, anywhere else. So
I think Trump it's less of a matter of it being personality specific than it is a lack of breadth of this anti-incumbent movement. Trump wrapped up the nomination with 40% of the Republican primary vote. Bernie Sanders, exposed an underbelly in Clinton on the left. But he got about 40, I think it was 45% of the primary vote. So these constituencies exist, but they're not majority constituencies, and they're not spread out, and they're not concentrated in certain races, like in these particular Senate states. Debbie Wasserman Schultz won her primary in Florida handily, despite Bernie endorsing her challenger and him getting a lot of donations nationwide because of that. Politico had a piece saying she's now, of the 28 House Democrats that supported Fast Track and are assumed to be TPP supporters, none of them got dislodged in their primaries. Some of them didn't even track primary challengers. And buried in that article is an anonymous comment from a Democratic operative saying, "Look, the notion that there is this widespread opposition to TPP in the country isn't true, and there are a lot of young voters out there, educated voters out there, that were effectively pro-trade and aren't animated by the anti-TPP argument. Obviously, there is a very loud anti-TPP constituency out there. You heard in the Democratic convention. It may well be that they're more single-issue anti-TPP voters than vice versa. So I'm not adjudicating here who's got the right argument. But there certainly is an argument being made that the populist wave is not as uniform as it might appear, and that might have implications for a lame duck TPP vote. If Donald Trump loses handily, and you might have Chamber of Commerce people and White House people coming together saying, "Look, there isn't this massive anti-incumbent populist movement out there. It's a bit more noise than substance, and you can vote for TPP and the lame duck and not worry about getting your head handed to you in your next primary."
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting point that intensity and multiple candidates running. You can have 40% of the vote can make a big difference as long as it's not a binary choice. This is interesting. The Republicans are trying to come up with ways to fix. To sort of make sure this doesn't happen again, and people are posing ideas such as, how can we make sure that that we don't end up with 17 people running again, and that you can't have interlopers just get in. There's this theory that we should be somehow weighting people's second choice, and I have to study this more. I think I might write about this, but there's like this theory that, like, say you're at a restaurant, and it's you can have steak or chicken, and you say, "I want to get the steak," and then if the waiter goes, "Oh, you know what else? We also have seafood," then you'll say, "Oh, you know what? I'll take the chicken," which defies logic. But introducing new players into a game somehow changes things in an unpredictable manner, and so I'm going to look into this more. I think I've written about this in the past. Like, other countries have a way that you can like weight your second choice,
right?
And so it may be that Scott Walker would have been a consensus candidate that everyone could have sort of gotten along with, and that he should have gotten it. It seems like majority rule seems like a good way to go, but sometimes it leads to weird outcomes.
Yeah, I find this very amusing for this reason. I mean, what you're basically talking about are things like instant runoff voting, which you or ranked voting, where you have a slate of candidates. You don't just vote for one; you vote for 5, and you rank them in order, or even you do the whole slate. You do 1 through 17, and then the vote counters will do a cut. Okay, who's 17th? We'll drop that person, reweight that, reallocate those person's other choices, and then look, and then cut till you're down to 1. And this concept has long been advocated by the independent left, who believe that if you can take away the argument that your vote is a wasted vote if you vote for the Green Party or what have you, then those parties or those candidates would perform better in a general election. Jill Stein, even today, when she talked about being a spoiler candidate, she said, "Well, you can solve this problem by having instant runoff voting. You won't have spoilers anymore," which, of course, glides past the fact that we don't have that today, so it's sort of a moot point. But what I find lacking in these arguments on the left is there are examples where this has been tried, and specifically San Francisco. San Francisco has instant runoff voting now, and it's relatively recent, but they have it. And the first time they had it in the mayor's race, you had the incumbent mayor, Ed Lee, who's considered as a bit of a corporate Democrat, centrist Democrat. The left in San Francisco doesn't like him. And then they went up against him with 16 different left-wing candidates who couldn't draw any attention to themselves, and Lee won the instant runoff voting handily on the first round. And it was totally the same as not having instant runoff voting. And my point there is that there's always a desire to try to fix political problems through process solutions, as opposed to just figuring out how to win more votes. And these process vote solutions often prove to be a total waste of time. So when I hear you say that, my reaction is, you're in such trouble that you're going to the well of pathetic process solutions instead of trying to figure out how do I win more votes for legitimate candidates.
I understand why you might think that. I'm not trying to design some sort of Rube Goldberg machine. What I am saying is that I'm not convinced that majority vote is the best way to select a Republican nominee.
Well, plurality vote. You didn't have majority. You had plurality vote.
Okay. So let's just apply now. I know this is obviously reverse engineering, the process based on the outcome you want, but just sort of as an intellectual exercise, like if Republicans had this, do you think Trump? There's really no way Trump would have been the nominee, right?
Well, I've long said that I think Trump was beatable by a solid center-right candidate that the rest of the party consolidated behind. I don't think he would have won a two-person race if it was a two-person race from the get-go. But that problem would not have been solved by procedural tinkering. You needed to find a candidate and rally behind that candidate, regardless of what the system was.
Right, but what I'm saying is, like, it may be that this goes back to the Tim Pawlenty of 2008, strategy, and Rubio tried it this time too. But it may be that 80% of the Republican electorate would have been perfectly happy with Scott Walker, and whereas 60% of the Republican electorate might have absolutely loathed Donald Trump. So you could make an argument that Scott Walker is much more the consensus candidate, the compromise candidate, that he should be the nominee who best represents Republican values. Like, he was nobody's first number one favorite.
But you're talking about the possibility on paper. Scott Walker's problem is that he gave bad answers to questions early in the campaign, and you would not have solved that problem by having a different process. It was the weakness in the candidates that was the problem, and a weakness in the establishment to pick one to elevate.
Would Republicans be in better shape today if Marco Rubio or Scott Walker were the nominee?
Of course. Trump.
And isn't the goal to elect, shouldn't the goal, the purpose of a Republican process, of the Republican nominating process, shouldn't the goal be to select the nominee who best represents the values and philosophy of the most Republicans and who can actually defeat the Democrat in the general election? Based on that, based on both of those things, you would say that Donald Trump should not be the nominee.
I mean, I agree with that, but I think you solve this problem by recruiting a better candidate and organizing support around that candidate. You're not going to get away with coming up with some... I mean, look, Trump was nominated after the Republican Party futz with the primary schedule, thinking that this was a great way to avoid having a Ron Paul type problem again, and it totally backfired.
But that doesn't. They obviously made it. So they obviously made a mistake, and there were unintended consequences. But what I'm saying is that it may well be that in the modern world, where there are incentives for 17 candidates to run in order to get publicity, and when the political public, the state of the conservative entertainment complex, there's all of the environmental factors out there, that it may be that rather than me sort of this isn't just me like tinkering with the rules desperately. But you could really make I think, a legitimate argument that the best way to respond to a situation in which Republicans are not nominating candidates who best represent their values and who can have a chance to win in November would be to change the process. That's a legitimate thing to do. It's not a foolish thing inherently to do.
There's this book out there. I forget the guy who wrote it, but the argument was that the Republican Party has suffered a deep intellectual atrophy, and they're not going to recover until they rectify that problem. There are deeper problems here. There are deeper problems here the Republican Party needs to solve. And
by the way, since you mentioned it, Bill, let me show everybody. I hold in my never nicotine-stained hands a copy of the paperback, which has Donald. You can see here the elephant is no longer wearing the dunce cap. He is now wearing the Donald Trump hair.
Classy touch.
So you might have seen this on Twitter, Bill, but for those who haven't, so the paperback is now available, or it soon will be. I've got copies here, so go buy the book. But stay tuned for the next book, Designing a Better System. How a better process could help Republicans stay relevant in the future.
I want to segue to a different but related topic. I just came back from my vacation in Maine, which was delightful, where I was staying on the coast. There were a good number of Trump signs. I was in Paul LePage country, I think, and I was pretty north. I was a couple hours north of Portland. And in the midst of the vacation, we had this episode where Paul LePage left this threatening voicemail to a Democratic state legislature. He then followed it up with more explicitly racist comments saying that people of color and Hispanics were the enemy, and they should be shot like you were in a war with people with different color uniforms, and it definitely felt like this is what a Trump presidency would be like. Vindictive voicemails to unfriendly legislatures, blatantly racist comments in press conferences. And it just seems like there is this constituency that is on the right. It's not the entire right, of course, but it's on the right. That is just unvarnished, full rage, no interest in trying to have a filter, trying to recalibrate thoughts to appeal to a wider constituency. There's no gut check. Is what I'm saying about to be racist? Maybe I shouldn't say that. Maybe I should rethink my views on this subject because they aren't very well thought out. There's none of that. And it just made me wonder how solvable the problem is. I mean, if you have a part of the Republican base that is immovable because it is so deeply racist, and it is not persuadable by reason and logic. It is just emotional rage. Is that something that can be fixed? So when you see the comments of LePage, do you say to yourself, "That's just LePage. That's an isolated case. This crackpot got in there because there were two three-way races, and he got in by pluralities, and that's not really the issue with conservatism nationwide"? Or will you talk about things like the alt-right and Trump hiring Stephen Bannon? Do you say to yourself, this is a deep problem in the conservative movement that is not easily medicated or surgically removed? It is becoming embedded in the movement.
Well, I don't think LePage is representative of anything, but I do think that there is a legitimate concern, putting that aside, with the Republican base, with the alt-right, with the mainstreaming of these things. I think that Um, you've got a lot of kind of working class whites who feel that the American dream they've been promised didn't come true. You have some of them be very frustrated. Some of them are advocating sort of a form of tribalism, white identity politics. I think that certainly accounts for some of the Trump support. And I really fear that we are headed in that direction where, I mean, look, we already have a situation where, the Republican Party is by and large a white party, and where Democrats are, large percentages of minorities tend to vote Democratic. But it didn't have to be that way, like especially with Hispanics. As recently as 2014, John Cornyn won the Hispanic vote narrowly in Texas. And so I was always sort of hoping that Republicans would really fight to try to win the Hispanic vote, or at least have parity there, and that we would continue to basically be fighting over ideas, over a different vision and different worldview, and not have demography be destiny, not have basically break down, go to our corners based on skin color or other superficial things. That's a danger, and the problem is that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. There's a sort of a force behind this, so like when you need to win white voters, you pander to white voters, which turns off Hispanics, which means you can't count on any Hispanics, so you have to pander to more white voters, which means you have to say things to turn them out at higher numbers, which might turn out. So it becomes, this spins out of control, and I don't think it's healthy. And I think so many of the things we do in politics on both sides are really unhealthy. I will say the one thing that I'm really happy to see is Hillary Clinton taking my advice, which was to surgically isolate and attack Trump, and to resist the partisan temptation to try to tie all Republicans and all conservatives to him. If that had happened, then conservatives and Republicans would have reflexively circled the wagons around him, because that's psychologically what happens when you're under attack. And I'm glad. I think it's good for the country that she didn't do that. And I think it's actually good for her. I think that it's if she wins, and that appears likely, then I think it'll be much easier for her to govern by have a consensus than it would be if she had gone the other tempting direction.
So last thing I want to ask you about is this exchange that happened on Rush Limbaugh's show. A caller confronted Rush, anti-Trump Republican, who was livid at Trump's flirtation with essentially the Jeb Bush immigration plan, where the people pay back taxes to stay. We're not going to want us to deport everybody. We'll get rid of the criminals, but the people who are working and contributing to society, they can stay if they do this or that. And that's not really amnesty. That's all a pro-immigration reform language. And he was saying that at the time in the primary, people like him were screaming that what Trump was promising was totally unrealistic, never going to happen, and essentially that people like Rush Limbaugh were dismissing those concerns and giving Trump cover. And Limbaugh responded by saying, well, this might enrage you, but I never took Trump seriously, specific to that question of of mass deportation. And that's produced a lot of reaction from other sources saying, well, Rush very well took him seriously on that point during the primary.
Well, the caller said, well, unfortunately, Rush, 10 million Republicans took him seriously, and it might have been nice if it had been called out by the most important conservative outlet or something. Rush took that to mean himself. The guy was talking about Fox News,
right.
But this was an interesting moment. So first of all, I'm amazed that the call screener let this guy get through. Bo Snerdley must have been asleep at the switch. The guy gets through, and I think, so number one, Limbaugh is really cloistered. I mean, the only way you could ever talk to him, is if you're Greta Van Susteren or Chris Wallace and he comes on your show via satellite, or if you're a caller, and the odds are astronomical to ever get on. So, and I think the fact that it was a regular, it was a regular civilian, ostensibly, what was it, Rick from L.A., yeah, who asked the question. Obviously, a very smart guy.
He's very articulate.
Very articulate, but not what Rush calls a seminar caller, right? So this was not. It did not appear to be a liberal plant who was calling, posing as someone else. This seemed authentic. And here you have Rush, essentially admitting on air that he had not shot straight with his audience. That he did not. That he always knew that Trump was sort of BSing about deporting everybody, but he never bothered to tell the audience. Now, I don't think this is going to be that moment in A Face in the Crowd when Andy Griffith is exposed or the Code Red moment. But I think it's a moment, and it's an interesting year. It's funny. I think I'm the only one who really picked up on this, but July 19th was the day when it became clear that Roger Ailes would not survive Fox News, and he was going to be leaving. And it was the day that Donald Trump officially became the Republican nominee. That's quite an amazing day in the Republican Party. And this date in August, what was it, the 29th maybe when it happened, is a couple days ago. That was, I'm not saying that it was a game changer moment, but it struck me as a very important moment where Limbaugh essentially conceded that he hadn't been shooting straight with his audience.
So what does that mean going forward? It feels like we have a lot of pillars of the Republican Party and the conservative movement that are shaky.
Yeah.
And here you have someone who is seen as a figure on the populist right, anti-immigrant right. He has long derided he was angry at Marco Rubio when he was flirting with immigration reform. He was lambasting Jeb Bush. So for him to say to his followers, his listeners, that he wasn't totally on the level, it just feels like I think there's a question here whether the anti-immigrant Trump right can remain a cohesive force and still dominate the party going forward. If their own leadership is shaky, perhaps they can't remain cohesive, and that will make it easier for the more enlightened voice of the party to be able to divide and conquer.
Yeah, except there's up and coming outlets, and there's Breitbart and there's Milo and other voices who are replacing the Limbaughs, who are arguably more, less tied to mainstream conservatism. But I do think that talk radio is dying and cable news is going to be struggling. Fox News specifically, although they all have an old audience. Fox has a very old audience. And, I threw this out on Twitter yesterday, what does this all mean? And John Ziegler, the documentarian and conservative talk show host, who has been pretty sharp in his analysis on what's going on the right, especially in terms of the entertainment complex. Says if Trump, his theory sounds about right to me. If Trump loses, then Limbaugh. It's not like it's not like the man behind the curtain is exposed yesterday. But if Trump loses, then like Rush sort of probably just fades away. By like 2020, he's just irrelevant, and the world has just kind of moved on. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like it went out with a whimper, not a bang, kind of thing. So like that's kind of, I think we'll look back at what happened as a moment, but not the ending, but just sort of a moment. This is a matter of accretion, and that's where I think it'll go.
Well, I think we should leave it on that note. Great,
all right, man.
Great to be back from vacay.
Yes, tanned and rested we are, and ready to take on the other dialogues with half our brains tied behind our back, just to make it fair.
Well, we have a post-Labor Day, Election Day sprint when we return next week, and I'm sure we'll...
3 debates, baby. 4 debates if you count the Veep debate, right. So a lot to cover here.
First debate on my birthday.
That's right. We'll have a special celebration here. Stay tuned. Check us out on Twitter at DMZ Show, and we'll see you back here next week.
All right, take care.
Thanks.